Today's NDE comes to us from Tony, who says after dying from an allergic reaction to a medication, he met a spirit guide who showed him life on other planets. Let's get into it. Hey, beyond death, Tony here. A few years ago, I had my own near-death experience that I thought I would share. Let me begin by saying that I understand anyone that says they don't believe me. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have believed me. With that said, you can already tell my experience steps outside what you probably are used to when you think NDEs. It was the end of 2019 and I was feeling under the weather. Of course, at that time, everyone was masked up and calling everything under the sun COVID. Hospitals were saying publicly that they were at capacity, and I have never liked going to see a doctor anyway, so I decided in my ultimate wisdom to just stay home and self-medicate. I took every over-the-counter medicine I thought would work. I even tried a few home remedies that some of the older members of my family swore would have me back on my feet in no time. Seems like everyone became a doctor in 2019, or so they thought. After about a solid week of steadily feeling worse, I finally broke down and went to the ER, where I waited an ungodly amount of time to get called back. To my surprise, after that long wait, the back was actually fairly empty, so I have no idea why I had to wait so long. Anyway, I took the test and checked out negative, but chest x-rays revealed I had a bad case of pneumonia. I was admitted and put on a respirator. The next few days are mostly a blur as they kept me sedated much of the time. It was some of the best sleep I have ever had. I remember waking up and thinking it was nighttime but being unsure when a nurse walked in and began changing out my IV bag before sedating me again. I don't know how much time passed from when I was sedated until when my experience began, but the next thing I knew I was floating directly over my body, looking down at myself. I could see and hear doctors and nurses rushing into my room, and at first it almost didn't register that it was my body they were working on. They seemed to be in such a hurry to save me, and I was gently floating there watching it all without a care. I kind of liked being outside of myself and decided to have a look around more. As I turned to exit the room, I first saw him. He was almost glowing a brilliant white. It was as if he were made up of nothing but light. I never really believed in any religion or any other theory of creation, so if anyone says we see what we expect to see, I would have to say that is false in my case, as I expected nothing but eternal rest, an end to my existence completely. Yet right here in front of me was a being that did not fit into what I expected at all. I decided to attempt communication with this being and was surprised to find out it was accomplished without speaking. "Who are you?" I asked. Just to clarify, I never really asked. I thought it, and the being heard it, but I did not speak a word. "Names are so trivial. You may consider me your guide while you are visiting." "Visiting?" I asked. "Oh yes, you are here temporarily while your body recovers." With that, the being said, "Now let's begin." And he placed one hand on my shoulder, and we began to rise up through the ceiling to the second floor, only we didn't stop rising. We continued straight up until we had left the hospital, and then continued until we had left Earth itself. Standing with this being in space was weird but fun at the same time. I asked him if I could visit the moon, and he said, of course, and we began floating towards the moon at a very high speed. It wasn't really scary, but it was definitely not a speed I would like to do if I had been inside my body. I don't recall feeling any fear the entire time I was outside of my body. Maybe fear doesn't exist on the other side. We settled down softly on the moon, and I realized I could see great distances, clear to these mountains that jutted up gracefully on the barren moon's surface. The only bad thing I could say about walking on the moon or being in space was that I did not get to experience being weightless, as I was already floating on Earth the moment I exited my body. So it seemed to lack that something extra. "You say you're my spirit guide. What else can you do?" I asked. "I can answer some questions within reason. Limitations include I cannot tell you your future or the future of any Terran. I can show you this galaxy and several others, as well as multiple dimensions, but there are places I cannot take you, such as heaven, hell, or paradise, as you are only a visitor, and may not enter unless accompanied by one greater than myself. This piqued my interest in many ways at once, so I unleashed a multitude of questions. Who would be considered one greater than yourself? Are there other life forms in these other galaxies and dimensions? Is God real? The being laughed loudly at me, then began to answer. One greater than myself would be the great Creator and those that He has entrusted to perform larger tasks. For instance, I cannot heal your Terran body. They can. I cannot show you future events. They can. I cannot open heaven's gates. They can. As for galaxies and dimensions, they are infinite in number. You can never grasp the true magnitude of existence because for some odd reason your species has determined itself to be the most intelligent and advanced when in truth you are far from it. Is there life in other galaxies and dimensions? Yes, life has flourished throughout the universe for eons before the first of your kind was ever created. Is God real, you ask? The great Creator is real and on your world. Many call Him God among other names. Yours seems to be one of the only species that harm each other over what to call Him, and this often makes Him sad or angry. He has commanded your species numerous times to just love one another, and yet most still refuse to listen. Feeling a little like I was being lectured for the sins of the entire species, I decided to change the subject. May I visit another planet with a more intelligent life? I asked. Yes, let's go, he replied. Placing his hand back on my shoulder again, we departed the moon, picking up speed, until everything looked like warp speed from Star Trek. We slowed just above a large planet that had 2 suns hanging in the sky. As we breached the planet's atmosphere, we flew straight at a dome covering an entire continent. Just when I expected us to hit it, we passed right through the dome before landing safely on the ground in what looked like a beautiful park. All around I saw these very tall people with fair skin and blonde hair. Some were walking, some were running, and still others were playing a game similar to fetch with what I can only guess would be their equivalent of a dog. In the sky, I saw small vehicles roughly the size of a compact car transporting people here and there. The buildings were amazing as well. I have never seen architecture like what these people had. Almost every building was made of colorful glass or crystal that seemed to change in color every few minutes and had intricate angles that defied gravity in ways I am sure we could never build here. I wanted to go talk with some of the people, but my spirit guide told me that they could not see me, and when I asked why they couldn't, he said it was a failsafe to prevent knowledge contamination between species. I'm not sure I understood it then or now, but for whatever reason the Creator did not want us communicating. Looking to the spirit guide, I asked, "Are there more planets like this?" "Oh yes, there are many, as I said before, more than you could ever count. I will show you one more and then we must get you back to your body." The next world we stopped at was like being transported back in time thousands of years. The first thing I noticed was a large river, and next to that river I saw pyramids. "Are we in Egypt?" I asked. The spirit guide again laughed at me and said, "No, we are not on your planet. In fact, these pyramids predate those on your planet. They have the same architect and the same builders, however." "How can that be if species contamination is not allowed?" I asked. "That has not always been the rule. In fact, at one time many different species were allowed to visit your planet and even colonize parts of it. Let's call it an experiment. However, the colonizing species began to cross-contaminate the procreation aspect, and the great Creator made them return to their own places of origin. He has long considered your species his proudest achievement, and at the same time his biggest mistake. He is very patient, however it too has limits. He has already cleansed your planet of those he deemed unworthy of his patience before, and he may again." As I pondered what to ask next, my spirit guide placed his hand on my shoulder, and we departed again. The next thing I knew, I was back in my hospital bed gasping for air. Doctors and nurses reattached my respirator, and the doctor said, "Welcome back. I thought we had lost you." After that I fell asleep very fast, so I assumed they sedated me again. I awoke the next morning, and they had removed my respirator. The doctor dropped by and told me that I had been given the wrong medicine through my IV, and it caused an allergic reaction that, when coupled with my pneumonia, compounded my breathing issues. I had actually died, and been what he called clinically dead for over 3 minutes. I was monitored for another 4 days before being allowed to leave the hospital. How this NDE changed my beliefs? Well, first of all, I do believe there is a God, or a great creator in charge of things now. I do not believe it matters by which religion you worship him. I also now know that we are not alone in the universe, nor are we the most intelligent. We as a species have not yet begun to understand what all there is to learn, and if we don't learn to stop hating for trivial reasons, and learn to love one another, we will never understand. We may even get wiped out so the great creator can start over fresh. If you have had your own near-death experience that you would like to share with the channel, please email it to the link in the description. I will ask that all submitted NDEs be at least 1,500 words, any less, and it won't be long enough to make a video. Until next time, stay blessed.